Boruto and Momoshiki have now become one, as it appears like the merger has finally taken place, with the most recent chapter of Boruto to Blue Vortex seeming to confirm that, as we do see quite a major shift in the attitude of Boruto. And with all the information that is currently being pushed to, we're going to see a completely different Boruto from then on, which means a completely different fighting style and mannerism that Boruto will now showcase with this deal that is taking place. So what exactly is taking place regarding Boruto and Momoshiki, and where does this idea of the merger come from? The merger effect that Momoshiki and Boruto have been experiencing has been one that has been hinted towards since chapter 75, where I discussed in a previous video breaking down exactly what took place. But to keep it brief, Boruto and Momoshiki's minds started to merge ever since Momoshiki changed Boruto's remaining DNA to enable him to come back. Normally when Boruto's karma is completely finished, meaning that he is 100% Momoshiki, he will then turn into Momoshiki. However, when Boruto was 82% done with the karma process, the remaining data that was supposed to be used for Momoshiki ended up being used for Boruto to come back to life, which means that Momoshiki could no longer resurrect. However, the main purpose of the karma was to enable an Otsutsuki to come back without the duplication of that Otsutsuki arising, which is what we see and learn through Kawaki, Jigen, and Ishiki's entire situation. So with the karma having a certain set of rules, and as we do know, there is usually one soul in one body, it appears like the karma is now attempting to do just that, to bring back Boruto to that state of equilibrium and balance, where he has one soul in one body. This is where the merger idea comes from, where Momoshiki and Boruto's identities were merged into a new and completely different one, where he will both showcase aspects of Momoshiki, but also aspects of himself, the regular Boruto. And this is what we have currently been seeing in Boruto to Blue Vortex. It is true that Boruto has been a character who has been quite cheeky, who has been quite sarcastic, and does have a lot of aura moments, but ever since the time skip, Boruto's aura has taken one of elegance, and it can clearly be seen in this chapter, where Boruto's mannerisms seem quite Otsutsuki-like, and to be specific, they seem quite Momoshiki-like. And this is something that we have seen, that every time Boruto uses the karma a little bit more, he starts changing in a manner that behaves more and aligns more like Momoshiki. The first case of this was when Boruto ended up using the karma versus code. We did see that prior to that, Boruto was still joking, even around Sasuke. Even though Sasuke wasn't having any fun at all, he was still joking around with Sasuke, still maintaining that cheeky personality, being a jokey little kid, having fun with his master, even though omnipotence took place and they were hunted down and consistently on the run. But after he claims that he attempted to use the karma, which took place probably in the fight versus code, or a little while after that, we do hear from Boruto himself that he felt like he was dying. Never in the past has Boruto claimed that he felt like he was dying when using the karma. Even when Momoshiki would take control, Boruto just felt like he couldn't control his body or he was going to sleep. He didn't feel as if he was dying, which means that there was a clear difference. The reason why Boruto felt like he was dying had little to do with Momoshiki, as we saw that Momoshiki basically gave up, but it had more to do with the fact that the karma wanted to go back to that state of homeostasis, where there is one body in one soul. So every time Boruto uses the karma, that process of merger is getting closer to being finalized. And that is what we saw, the biggest change in Boruto's personality, where he appeared quite different than the Boruto that we had seen in the past, with a little bit more Otsutsuki mannerisms, the trash talk that he has, the mannerism in which he behaves. We see different phrases that Boruto ends up using when he is fighting versus code, the way he is. Obviously, fighting versus code, somebody who basically led to Sasuke becoming a tree, does end up bringing a level of anger to him, but it was more than that. It was that cocky personality, that cocky anger, which we do see Boruto being cocky, but not to this extent, especially not when he's fighting somebody serious. And we also see it when it comes to Kawaki. Obviously, we had a Boruto who acknowledged the fact that Kawaki had his reasons, and that it probably wasn't his fault and that he understood Kawaki. But after fighting versus Kawaki for the first time and knocking Kawaki out, the language that Boruto used is something that he wouldn't have used in the past, saying that Kawaki is pitiful, haven't you trained at all? The mannerism that Boruto uses is something akin to Momoshiki, especially with that phrase as pitiful, as Momoshiki is often the one who looks down at other people. And in that instance too, we did end up seeing Boruto's karma appear, which most likely meant that the merger was getting even closer to being finalized, where Boruto ended up escaping, and when he does end up coming back, you can also see the way he talks to Konohamaru. He looks down on people. That's the main thing that we do end up seeing that is different when it comes to Boruto then and Boruto right now. Boruto does seemingly have this attitude of looking down at people. The way he talks to Konohamaru when fighting versus Hidari, he says, "I said focus, Konohamaru, or you'll die." Especially due to the fact that Konohamaru is older and in Boruto's eye is his sensei, he still is looking down at Konohamaru, although we still do end up seeing the master, but it's just the language that is being used. It is something that just seems like a person who is looking down at you. And I'm not saying to say that, oh, this is bad, but these were the simple hints that we were given. And in this chapter, especially after Kashin Koji posed the question to Boruto, asking if he ended up taking that deal with Momoshiki, and now he is deciding not to talk about it. The way he talks to Inogen, it still shows that attitude of looking down at people. Boruto has this villainous aura while still maintaining that goodness about him, and this perfectly describes what this merger is supposed to be alike. It's supposed to be a combination of both Boruto and Momoshiki. So Boruto will still have traits that remain like Boruto, but he will now have on top of that traits of Momoshiki. And whether the merger took place completely and Boruto's merger is finalized where they have been essentially fused, almost like Goku and Vegeta having a fusion leading to Vegito, I'm not necessarily sure if the merger did end up taking place to that extent, but that is the path that the story is going towards. And I believe that the merger is finally going to be completed when Boruto actually dies when using the karma. And this is not Momoshiki at all. This is the main point that was being stressed in the fact that we have a depressed Momoshiki that hasn't said things in years. And we also had a Momoshiki who echoed in the past that he didn't understand what was taking place with the merger. All of this ends up pointing to the fact that this is not something of Momoshiki's own plan. Everything that is happening right now regarding the karma has little to do with Momoshiki. And Boruto extending this thread as described through the title to Momoshiki has come with its own negatives, as both Momoshiki and Boruto do not necessarily know the consequences of their actions, and that consequence is going to be them fusing. And this is where I believe that everything we saw in the previous arc has been setting this up. A different change that we're going to see in Boruto, and it's going to be manifested in his fighting style. We do know that Boruto's sword has been chipped, which means that we're not going to see Boruto use the sword anytime soon, or at least he's going to have to get it fixed before then. So in the meanwhile, if something ends up happening, I do believe that we're going to see either Boruto himself tap into Momoshiki's powers, or we're going to see Momoshiki take control of Boruto's body. But a likely outcome that we're going to see is almost the teaming up or the combination of Boruto and Momoshiki taking place, where there are two options. Either it is that when Boruto uses the karma, their merger is completely active, where Boruto and Momoshiki are 50-50, where like a fusion that happens in the past, they're basically both in control of the body. Then it would mean that Boruto, when he's not using the karma, he remains himself. Or we end up seeing something completely different, where regardless of whenever the karma is active or not, Boruto and Momoshiki remain 50-50. And this is the scariest outcome, where we're probably going to see this more villainous aura that Boruto has being taken up. We see this parallel between Momoshiki and Boruto and that of Himawari and Kurama, where Kurama and Himawari have become one. This idea is one that has been showcased a lot. And we're seeing the idea of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex, the 2 Blue Vortex, the Vortex having a lot to deal with the Uzumakis, as we know that both Himawari and Boruto are Uzumakis. And those are the vortexes of destiny. It appeared from Momoshiki that it was Boruto's destiny for all of this to happen regarding omnipotence. And since we saw that Momoshiki had a role to play regarding omnipotence, Boruto's destiny regarding Momoshiki was linked for a while. And the destiny of Himawari and Kurama by proxy was also something that was destined to happen. But on one hand, we see the light side, we see how it can be used as a form of goodness for the hope of humanity, and when it comes to Boruto and Momoshiki, we see that darkness. We see how it darkens Boruto's own aura, makes him more villainous, in a way that at times it definitely looks like it is hindering Boruto. And in this case, we're going to see if it's a real hindrance in the fact that although Boruto will gain more power, but will he necessarily be able to accomplish his goals at a better rate? As this is definitely not the plan of Kashin Koji, and Kashin Koji himself may have seen this in the future, and this deal may be one of the many reasons why their plan never ends up working. As Kashin Koji only sees the possibilities, and if Boruto, as a singularity of fate, doesn't tell Kashin Koji about the action that he did which could affect the future, Kashin Koji doesn't have the real idea of where exactly the future is going to lead to, and that is where we can possibly see Kashin Koji believing that Boruto's actions have been aligned with a specific future. However, Boruto's actions have not, and thus an even worse future does take place. And this is something that we could genuinely end up seeing taking place, and I wouldn't be surprised if things end up going wrong. There are multiple pointers at this. The fact that Boruto and Momoshiki have this deal going on, which Kashin Koji can't necessarily know. He can only say that it's a possibility that the deal between Momoshiki and Boruto has taken place, and the fact that Boruto himself, his ideology doesn't necessarily match with that of Kashin Koji. And since going into this they are not in the same wavelength, it means that the outcome that can come out is definitely not going to be good. Well, concerning the fighting style that we can see Boruto and Momoshiki now manifest is one that incorporates every sort of identity that Boruto now has, where now, which is contrary to what we saw in the past. Obviously, Boruto did use Momoshiki's abilities to some extent. We did see him use the Byakugan, but apart from better chakra control and better fighting ability and experience, we didn't really get to see Boruto tap into some of the exclusive abilities that Momoshiki has. But now, due to the fact that their identities are merging, we could generally see that be a possibility, where the sword that Boruto now ends up creating is more akin to that of Kinshiki's. The abilities that Boruto uses, whether it be ninjutsu or various forms of taijutsu or kenjutsu, are going to be more alike to the Otsutsuki's. Boruto's words are going to be more prideful. At times, this idea of pride and looking down at other people has been something in Boruto's character in the time skip, but especially using the karma, we could see that being showcased even more. Boruto's bloodlust and Boruto looking down at other people like they are insignificant creatures, as Boruto liked to say. Him having similar close to Momoshiki is something that I personally look forward to. But how exactly will Boruto come back? How exactly will Boruto potentially regain his own personal identity and permanently expel that of Momoshiki? As obviously Boruto will return to that character that he was and eventually gain back his sword. How can that take place? And the key that I believe that will lead everything towards this path of Boruto regaining that hope, regaining his own personal identity, is the Jogan. And if you want to find out more about how that will take place, you have to watch this video right here.